Hello and welcome to Nithrania Game Club. My name is Barrage, and in this video I'm going to show you how to play Barrage with automa players. You can play solo with one or more automa players, you can play with more human players and one or more automa players. It's completely up to you. And I'm going to show you how those automa players take their turns, because there are some differences compared to the standard game. So, here we go. When you play with automa players, always play with the advanced rules. That means create the combinations of the company boards and executive officers, and also prepare the starting contracts. Automa players always start the game first, and human players start the game in the last positions. That means the human players choose the combinations of company boards and executive officers first. Let's say we have one human player here and two automa players. The human player chooses the combination first. For example, he would choose this combination with this starting contract. Then automa players never play with the executive officers. They also don't use the starting contracts. So they only use the company boards, and now you have to randomly determine their starting player order. After doing that, place your token to the last position. Prepare the company board for the automa players as usual. So the automa players also start with 6 excavators, 4 concrete mixers, but automa players don't use credits. Instead, they use victory points. Anytime they would gain credits, they would gain the equal number of victory points, and vice versa. If they would lose credits, they would lose victory points instead. They can even get below 0. So at the start of the game, they don't start with 10 victory points, but those 6 credits, which they don't have, are turned into a victory point. So they start with 16 victory points. Then shuffle the deck of automa tiles and place them with this side up. As I already said, automa players don't use credits. In addition, they also don't use these bonuses for the third powerhouse on their company boards. However, they use this second and fourth powerhouse bonuses. Then the actions automa players would take are determined by these automa tiles. When placing engineers, they always place indicated number of engineers, and they always place them to the first available action space for the given action. They can completely ignore the requirements on this action space. In addition, they don't perform this action, they always perform the action depicted on the automa tile. The first available space is counting from top to bottom and then from left to right. If they would have to place engineers on these red outline spaces, they place indicated number of engineers, but they don't have to pay these 3 credits. Basically, they don't lose 3 victory points. If all the action spaces would be occupied and they still have to perform the action, they would place the indicated number of engineers somewhere nearby and they would still perform that action. The same applies to these construction action spaces. If the automa player is required to place 2 engineers, that player would place 2 engineers regardless of these requirements on the action spaces. The income and headstream phase is played as usual. That means that if the automa players would have any bonuses already uncovered, they would get these bonuses. Then in the action phase, at the start of each automa turn, flip the tile. You always have to have 2 tiles available, the action tile, and then this is a criteria section. After this player takes the full turn, it's the next automa player's turn. That means you would flip another tile, and this tile would determine the actions for the second player, and this is the criteria side. When the deck runs out, simply reshuffle it and create the new draw deck. This action side determines what action the automa player would perform. There are always 8 actions depicted. This is the first one, this is the second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh and 8th action. If the automa player is able to perform the first action, that player performs the action and the turn would be over. If not, then that player would try to perform the second action. This is the dashed action, and if that player would be able to perform that action, they continue to the next one. Basically, this dashed action is the only one that doesn't end automa player's turn. So if the automa player is not able to perform this first action, then it would or wouldn't perform this dashed action, and it would try to perform the third action. If the automa player would be able to perform the third action, the turn would be over. If not, it would try to perform the fourth action, and so on and so forth. If the automa player wouldn't be able to perform any action, this eighth action is always available. It's similar to the bank action space. There's one more exception to the standard rules. If the automa player would be able to perform the action, but that player wouldn't have enough engineers, he would perform that action anyway with the remaining number of engineers. In this section of the video, I will explain how the automa players perform their actions. So we'll start with the production action. There are three conditions for the automa player to produce energy. First, the automa player has to have at least one functional system that will be able to produce energy. So there has to be a powerhouse belonging to the automa player, connected through any conduit to either the dam which is neutral or which belongs to that automa player. And of course, that dam has to contain some water drops. Second, the automa player will only produce energy if that player has anything to gain on the energy track. So let's take a look at it in a reverse logic. If the automa player would be eligible for the full end of round bonus, that means the player marker on the energy track is already in the section corresponding to the current round, and in addition, that automa player would also score 6 victory points at the end of the round because the player marker is first on the energy track. That player would not produce energy. That player would have nothing else to gain. So the automa player would only produce energy if the player marker is not in this section corresponding to the current round, or even if it is in that section, but that player is still not first on the energy track. And the third condition is related to the contract tiles. In this example, this action would only be performed if the maximum energy produced would fulfill at least one of these depicted contracts, so at least one yellow contract. So in this example, if automa player would be able to fulfill at least one of those yellow contracts, let's say using this system, that player will produce energy. It has to be the color of the contract depicted on the action tile. So even if the automa player would not be able to fulfill these yellow contracts in this example, but that player would be able to fulfill green contracts, that player would not perform the production action. So if all those three conditions are met, the automa player would produce energy. They always produce maximum amount of energy. So this blue player has two options how to produce energy, but this system produces more energy because there are 2 water drops and a conduit with a production level 3. Then add the bonuses or the penalties from the action space and also the bonuses from the company board. Just to remind you, do not add the bonus for the third powerhouse. So 6 energy from the system plus 1 and plus 1 is 8 energy total. Now the automa player would fulfill the highest energy contract from the contract office. So with 8 energy, one of these 2 red contracts can be fulfilled, even though they are higher level than the contract depicted on the action tile. If there are 2 contracts with the same value, take the one on the right side. Then place the contract next to the automa player's player board and of course take the benefit as well. As you can see, automa players don't buy contracts, they fulfill contracts directly from this contract office. If they produce enough energy, they can even fulfill the national contract. When automa players perform this water management action, they add the indicated number of water drops to the headstream tile or tiles, and they follow the standard rules. So if the water drop has a small white arrow, that water drop will start flowing immediately. However, automa players would perform this action only if at least one of the water drops would reach one of their dams. So in this example, we have to place one water drop that starts flowing immediately. Looking at the current board status, there is only one dam belonging to the blue player, and if that player adds a water drop, it would overflow this dam, it would overflow here as well, and it would reach the dam belonging to that player. So the automa player performs the action and places the water drop. If, for example, this dam would be empty, then the water drop would overflow here, but it would stop here. In that case, the blue player would not perform the water management action. Now, in this example, the automa player has to place 2 water drops, but they will not start flowing immediately. Now, we have to consider the board situation as if the water flow phase would start immediately and all the water drops would start flowing down. That means this water drop would overflow here, and stop here. Then this dam would only have 1 water drop and it would be able to store another one. So the automa player would place 1 water drops to this head stream. However, the second drop will not be placed, because these 2 water drops would end up in this dam and the third one would overflow everything. So even if this automa player could place 2 water drops, only 1 will be placed. Now if this basin would be empty, then the first water drop would actually stop there, and in that case the automa player would place both water drops because they both would end up in the blue dam. And one final example. Let's say the automa player has to perform this action, so add 1 water drop that starts flowing immediately. And that player has multiple dams on the game board, so there are more options. And that 1 water drop would actually be able to fill both this dam and also this dam. And that water drop can be placed in both of these headstream because it would end up in the blue dam. Then use the tiebreaker on this criteria card. Here you can see that there is an order D, C, B, and those letters correspond to the head streams, this being A, this is B, C, and D, which means that in this example, this 1 water drop would has to go from the D stream first, then C, then B, and so on. So because the D head stream is a legal place, that player would place 1 water drop here, which would start flowing immediately. This action says that the automa player has to discard both red contracts from the contract office and then move the energy marker by 2 spaces. So simply discard those 2 red contracts and draw new ones from top of the deck. In order to perform the construction action, 4 conditions must be met. First, the structure itself, so the powerhouse, has to be available. Second, the technology tile of the same type has to be available, or the wild technology tile. Third, all the required machineries has to be available. And finally, the building space of the same type must be available somewhere on the game board. So, when all those 4 conditions are met, place the indicated number of engineers on the first available action space, place the required number of machineries on the construction wheel, add the technology tile as well, and then turn the construction wheel. And then it's time to place the structure on the game board. First and foremost, if the structure you place on the game board would be the 3rd structure of a complete production system, place the structure there. In this example, there's a neutral dam here with the conduit, so the powerhouse could be placed here. Or there's a neutral dam here with the black conduit, so the blue player could also place the structure over here and have another full system. So there are 2 options at the moment, but in case there was only 1 option, let's say this conduit was not here, then the automa player would place the structure so that it completes the system. In our example, we have more options, so we need to use additional criteria. Look at the automa card and look into the column which corresponds to the structure the automa player is trying to build, and you can find the explanation of all these symbols in the rulebook. But in this example, the powerhouse has to be connected to the conduit with the highest value. So narrowing our options down, we have 2 systems which can be completed with this 3rd structure. And this system has a conduit with a production value 2, and this one with the production value 3. So using this additional criteria, the powerhouse has to be built in this location. If after applying the first criteria you would still end up with multiple options, you would follow the 2nd criteria, the 3rd criteria, and if you still have multiple options, you place the structure on the indicated space with this number at the bottom of the card. The numbers and letters correspond to the locations on the game board. When performing this workshop action, first of all, automa players have to lose the indicated number of victory points. Then they can rotate the construction wheel. Exactly as in the standard rules, when you rotate the construction wheel and you release your technology tiles and machineries, these become available again. In order to perform this action, you have to have the expansion, and unfortunately I don't have that expansion yet, so I cannot demonstrate that for you. Then this is the machinery action. As indicated by this V symbol, you cannot take this action in the 5th round. So in the 1st, 2nd, 3rd and 4th round, automa players have to lose the indicated number of victory points and they gain depicted machinery. If they can choose between excavators and concrete mixers, they choose the machinery where they have fewer pieces available. That means those pieces are not on a construction wheel. In case they would have equal amount of excavators and concrete mixers, they would take one excavator. If automa players would perform this patent office action, they would lose 2 victory points and they would gain 1 advanced technology tile. They have to take the tile of the same type as indicated on the action. So in this example it has to be a conduit, or it could be a wild tile. If none of them are available, automa players don't perform that action. If there are multiple tiles available, automa players always choose the topmost one. Again, place only the indicated number of engineers and automa players only lose 2 victory points, not 5. And when there's no other option, automa players would place 1 engineer to the bank and they would score 1 victory point. So that's how you play Barrage with automa players. At the end of the rulebook there is a section which describes how to change the difficulty levels for the automa players. If you want to do it, you'll find the instructions at the end of that rulebook. Otherwise, if you would have any other questions or comments, please put them into the comment sections below. If you like the show, if you like this video, like it, subscribe. You've been watching Game in a Nutshell. My name is Barrage and hope to see you next time.